Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Cory. I'm your host, Cory Smith, here with a special guest this time around, an Aaron Fitt, D1Baseball editor, writer, everything in between. Aaron, first of all, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great, Corey. Ready for the season to start here. It's always a grind to get through the season preview content, but we're there. The season starts tomorrow, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I was going to say, starts in Puerto Rico for NC State, a pretty big series for them coming up. Obviously, they're looking at trying to, get a couple wins coming out of Puerto Rico, come back home. I think it's like 17 of the first 18 games NC State plays at home after that. So they'll get used to being in Raleigh, but just wanted to get, first of all, your thoughts on this year's team. I mean, I joked with you that you guys have them listed as a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament in several months from now. So obviously all these projections beforehand are just kind of like, all right, setting the tone for what we think of these teams beforehand, but they're listed as a 2 seed in the Knoxville Regional. Just your thoughts on this team heading into the season.
Well, I like this team a lot, honestly, and I will tell you right off the top that I was probably the high man on NC State in our rankings discussion. Going into it, I kind of compare them a lot to North Carolina because I think in both cases that the strength is the pitching, and maybe there are some questions about the lineup, but I think I like NC State's lineup more. There's just more proven commodities, and so my personal pecking order, I think I had them even higher than UNC. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me if they wind up hosting a regional, not being a 2 seed. But I got outvoted. This is not, believe it or not a dictatorship at D1 Baseball. But that said, there's North Carolina's pitching. I do think is a little bit more proven. You're relying on some guys like Jacob Dudan in a starting role is new. We need to see how that plays out. I mean, I think that the ceiling is very exciting for him in that role, but we need to see it because the track record of great stoppers who then make that transition to starting is mixed. Some guys it works great, other guys you look up midseason they're back in the bullpen. And I think a lot of guys in our staff kind of think that might wind up happening with Dudan because he was just so dominant in the bullpen. We'll see. I mean, that's kind of a TBD thing, but Heath Andrews very talented and has experience, but it was a 6+ ERA last year, and the same with Cooper Gassiglio. I mean, it's a 10 ERA last year, so we all know he's a lot better than that. Expecting him to have a much better season, and certainly that ERA was inflated by probably a couple of bad outings, really bad outings, but that's another guy that I really like, but the numbers don't necessarily back it up. So as much as we do like their pitching, it's not quite the slam dunk maybe that Carolina's is. So if you're looking to kind of parse those teams, that's maybe why UNC's ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you too. I mean, that kind of goes into the next question I had for you. I want to break down some individuals here as well, but looking at the overall, kind of body of work for NC State, what types of things do they need to do to push themselves into that potential number 1 seed? Like, what types of things need to happen for them? Are there individual players that you feel like need to be at that level, or is it just a team as a whole?
Yeah, a few things. I mean, I mentioned briefly a couple of them. With Dudan and Andrews and Gassiglio, all those guys. I love the core 5 returning arms for NC State, with Ryan Marone and Anderson Nance being the other 2. And I think we know we can count on Marone at the top of the rotation. He's one of the best aces in the league. And we know we can count on, in my opinion, on Nance as a stopper who's just, I think, an elite guy. Collins Black is another kind of unproven guy that will have a major role at the back of the bullpen. The Duke transfer early through 9 innings last year. And it's a great arm, and it's turbo sync, and it's, mid 90s and got a good slider. Like, all the pieces are there. Track record, not so much. So, and some freshman arms that I'm excited about. We just need to see. So part of it is just the pitching, kind of getting its footing and showing it's as good as we think it might be. But then in the lineup, I think, they lost a decent amount, but I mean, you got 4 really nice pieces back, I think, to build around with Chris McHugh, who led the team in hitting last year. And of course, Luke Dixon is a proven, heading into his 3rd year as a starter, proven guy, a catalyst guy. I think Ty Head is going to make the leap to superstardom this year. I think that's a key is will he be as good as I think he'll be? Again, I feel pretty strongly about that because he controlled the zone so well as a freshman, and that's usually a really good indicator for future success. I mean, it was 40 8 walks against 28 strikeouts, and
Mhm.
only hit 274 and still had a 433 on base. So the guy's an on-base machine, and there's more power coming. He's only 4 home runs last year. There is more power coming. He's going to be a double-digit home run guy this year. He's going to play center field. I think this is a guy that could be a top 50 pick in the draft, if he performs up to his talent. So, that certainly is an important piece. And then Braden Fraseman is the fourth kind of key returning back. You add a Dalton Bargo from Tennessee, who I think is going to be just a impact bat. They're just going to stick in the middle of that order, and that guy hits, and he hits for power. He's got track record, and so I feel pretty good about those 5 pieces. And then you kind of sprinkle in, maybe Drew Lanfear behind the plate. I feel pretty good about that too. He's a veteran guy. He's gotten his moments. He's gotten his big hits over the years. I think he'll do a good job behind the plate. But he hit 217 last year. I mean, it's like needs to take a step forward. The left side of the infield's new, exciting though. Mikey Ryan at shortstop is tooled up. One of maybe the most tooled up player on the team. I mean, he can really run. He's got real bat speed. I think he can really play shortstop, but we'll need to see that play out over the course of the spring. And then, of course, Sherman Johnson, the JUCO transfer at third base. I mean, hit for power and stole 21 bags last year and JUCO ball. And again, pretty good control of the strike zone. He's an electric athlete. And so potentially another difference maker. So you start going through it, and then you going through the whole starting 9 here, Cory, but like Everett Johnson, the freshman, I think is going to be in left field.
Like
he's dynamic. It's just a little bit maybe undersized, but like there's strength there. There's real, feel for the barrel from the left side. It's almost like a little Tyler McDonough-ish, I think he's Elliott Avent will probably call him a throwback ball player kind of guy. I mean, I think he's a real Elliott Avent favorite sort of player. And so I'm excited to see him as well. So, I mean, you go through it all, and gosh, I actually really like the lineup pieces. I mean, I really, they always hit. They always hit.
Yourself into liking the lineup now, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I already did. I was already higher on them probably than our staff, but yeah, I mean, I think that part is probably going to surprise people. I think people are wondering maybe about the lineup because there are, probably 5 new faces and starting roles there, but I think they're going to be pretty darn good.
I was going to say, I think the biggest thing that you need to see from some of these guys, and you mentioned it obviously with, the fact that you need to see a little bit more pop from Ty Head, but there's a couple of different guys that need to see more pop. You mentioned Drew Lanfear. Struggling at the plate last year with 217, but also his slugging percentage was 289. Ty Head's slugging percentage is 402, so a lot less than his on base percentage. And again, it's a lot of the fact that he was walking a lot more. But there's a few guys that all right, the slugging percentage needs to grow up. You need to see these guys get a little bit better. But yeah, as far as the starting rotation too, I wanted to touch on that. Just your thoughts. You mentioned it. The fact that Jacob Dudan stepping up into that role, becoming a guy that, needs to be a little more consistent as far as being a guy that's starting and getting to, 5-6 innings, whereas his career high was 4 innings coming into the season. He's never pitched longer than that. I think that was in Omaha or I think that might've been one game where people thought he should finish the game either in Omaha or in the super regional, but just your thoughts on him moving into that role, what you've heard behind the scenes, because talking to him last week, he mentioned the fact that he's going a little more fastball heavy. He said back in the fall, like he didn't even use the slider at all. They just didn't even pitch that. They were just focusing on the other 3 pitches to kind of grow those and then bring the slider back in the spring. Just your thoughts on what he brings to the starting rotation and what he needs to do this season.
Yeah, I love the developmental plan that Clint Chrysler put together for him. Putting that security blanket, the binky, the slider on the shelf, because we all know that's an elite pitch, one of the best pitches in college baseball. And so let's focus on developing the other stuff, and that's the key for him to succeed in the starting role. You got to really establish the fastball, and certainly he's got plenty of velocity there. Working more with a 2-seamer as well as a 4-seamer to kind of, give hitters different looks and attack guys different ways. I think that change up developing is a really important piece, to combat the left-handed hitters. And it sounds like that's come along pretty encouragingly as well. And so if you're, a legit 4-pitch guy, who's got confidence in throwing all those pitches when you need to, not just, it's, here's the slider. Like, I need to make a pitch. Here's a slider. Like, he can sometimes beat guys when they know the slider's coming. It's that good. Almost Carlos Rodon-ish. That's actually kind of what it reminds me of, is Rodon always in college commanded his slider better than his fastball. And, when he needed to make a big pitch, it was slider. It's coming. you're probably not gonna hit it anyway. But but it makes it harder when there's a little bit more uncertainty and you have to guess as a hitter what you're gonna see. And so I think that's just a natural step in his evolution.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you too, just about the ACC in general this season, because it's funny. You look at the rankings, and I think a lot of people, when they saw it come out, they're like, "Oh, well, NC State at number 5 in the ACC." Well, that's number 17 in the country according to you guys' preseason rankings. Clemson at number 6, and that's number 19. So like 8 teams inside the top 25 from the ACC. Obviously, the SEC typically dominates the headlines when it comes to baseball, but the ACC has several teams, 8 teams inside the top 25, 2 teams inside the top 10, and then UNC just outside of that at number 11. Just your thoughts on the ACC as a whole this season heading into the year too?
Yeah, once again, going to be a very good league. A lot of very talented teams. The thing that's interesting is I think there are some teams that have elite offenses like Georgia Tech and Louisville that, maybe not as much proven firepower on the mound. And there are some teams that have, I think, elite pitching. North Carolina, Clemson, I think, will have really good pitching. We talked about NC State, Wake Forest. Those are teams that I think are loaded on the mound, but maybe have more to prove in the lineup. So it doesn't feel like there's one team that like is a juggernaut that checks every box. We have Georgia Tech at the top of our list because I just think it's the best position player group in the country. It's absurdly loaded. There can be a handful for everybody, but their pitching is kind of gradually improved, year over year under their pitching coach, Matt Taylor. So we think they've got the pieces there to pitch better as well. And they should play a lot better defense than they have sometimes in the past. And so I feel like that's most likely to be the scariest team. But it doesn't feel like there's an overwhelming, slam dunk juggernaut favorite in the league. And you could convince me that the top 8 or maybe even 9 teams, because we have Miami also in the top 25. They got a great offense coming back, a couple of exciting young sophomore arms that, should be dudes for them. And then Virginia is our 9th team. They're not in the top 25, but like they got real star power. I mean, AJ Gracia and Eric Becker are 2 of the best players in the country, and they're back. They're kind of holding down the lineup for them. And if their left-handed pitching matures the way they hope, it's all those guys who were at Duke last year and now at Virginia in their rotation. If those lefties, can take steps forward, that could be a team that wins the league. So you could convince me that any of the top 9 teams wins the ACC. I really think it's actually pretty wide open.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you too. I mean, just the talent for NC State coming into this year. Looking at you guys' projections for the top prospects in the ACC as far as the 2026 and 2027 drafts, obviously guys like AJ Gracia and then Drew Burris, 2 guys at the very top of that list, and that's the reason for Virginia being more than competitive in the ACC, but also Georgia Tech just loaded with several top prospects. You guys have Ty Head as the top prospect for NC State going into this year, and obviously a guy that for those that don't know, he does age out to the point where he's able to leave as a sophomore for this upcoming year. But how important is it for him to become one of the bigger faces of this program going into the season? We know Chris McHugh, a guy that has big pop, and there's a couple others that come back from this past season. But how important is it for him to really take that next step? Obviously, we've seen it defensively, but, at the plate too.
Yeah, I think he's got to be the guy. I just think I think he should be their best player this year. I think he will be their best player this year. But, scouts kind of wanted to see him play center field. Is he a true center fielder, or is he a tweener, was kind of the question I was hearing from scouts heading into the fall. And, Elliott will tell you he's a great center fielder. He's up there with, Brett Williams and Tyler McDonough, and, reel off 6 names of great NC State center fielders. And he thinks he's right in that category. And so, that really boosts his stock. Those are the 2 things he needs to do to be potentially a day 1 draft pick is show he can play center field and hit for more power. And I think both those things are going to happen. So I just think he's an emerging star, and I think he's going to be the guy for them this year.
Yeah, he's just so rangy too. I mean, 6'3", a little over 200 pounds, like just a big dude. And then, you mentioned Mikey Ryan earlier too, but like, how big is it for him to have to kind of grow into that role this season too, being a guy at the shortstop position? Because obviously, NC State's had a run of really good shortstops over the years. And he's a guy that, comes over from LSU. There's a lot of, thought process that he'll be really good down the stretch or, coming into NC State. But at the same time, he's a guy that hasn't really been able to prove himself, hasn't been able to put himself in those situations. You guys have him listed as a number 11 overall prospect in the 2027 draft out of the ACC. What types of things does he have to do to prove himself this year?
Yeah, and that might wind up being light because, if you talk to the NC State coaches, they'll tell you he's got some of the best tools, raw tools we've had in years. I mean, it's really just an explosive athlete. I think our guy, Joe Healy, had him down the line at like 4 flat or something, from the right side, which is flying. I mean, he can really run. And it's I think the offensive profile is pretty exciting. It's just a matter of how consistent will he be defensively at short. That's the thing we just don't really know yet until you've gone through the ringer. And that's the key. I think that's a huge key for this team is will that new look left side of the infield be steady? I mean, I know they can make the spectacular plays. It's just all about making the routine plays, to make sure that your staff has confidence to throw strikes. I mean, that's you got to play good defense. I'm pretty optimistic about it, but like that's the part that's just kind of an unknown right now.
Yeah, I was going to say there are quite a few unknowns, but Mikey Ryan being one of those guys that all right, if he really shows the talent this year, that could elevate NC State, really raise. We talk about ceiling raisers. Like if guys have a bigger season than you expect, sure, but if he helps, then that's a floor raiser for NC State, especially in terms of the lineup and defensively. I wanted to ask you too. I mean, you've been around the program quite a bit. Obviously, you lived in the Raleigh area for a long time, lived around this area. You've known Elliott Avent for as long, if not longer than most people when it comes to national analysts. Just your thoughts on what this season means to him, because coming into his 30th season, we've heard, he loves the program. He's seen the program being built, to the point where he's finally getting the facilities he's asked for, that finally getting all the things that you wanted around this program. But what does this season mean for him going into year number 30 with this team?
I think it's very meaningful, and I think every year we wonder, oh, is this going to be his last go round? Like how much longer is he going to do this? I mean, he loves baseball, I think, more than anyone I've ever met. He is just an absolute baseball diehard. He watches every game in the playoffs, every inning of every game. And if he can't stay up late enough, he'll DVR it and watch it first thing in the morning, just like he can't get enough of it. And so I think it will be hard for him to walk away. I mean, he loves coaching, clearly, he loves interacting with his staff and his players. And it's hard to imagine him doing anything else with his life. Is he going to go fishing every day? I don't know. I mean, it's just like he just lives and breathes baseball. But you can't do it forever. There's an end date for everybody, and obviously Chris Hart is waiting in the wings there to take over whenever that day comes. But if I had to guess, I mean, I think this might be his last year. I don't know. I mean, he hadn't told me that, but you just kind of read the tea leaves. This could be the last go round. And so I think that it's certainly going to be a meaningful season for him.
Well, and I wanted to ask as a follow-up to that, you mentioned Coach Hart. Obviously Chris has been around the program for a really long time now at this point, a guy that, has been, not only helping to, on the field, but really building the roster for the last decade now at this point, and has adapted to what the game has asked for, going out in the transfer portal and getting a ton of guys there too. I mean, how important has he been to this program, and how ready do you feel like he is for that role once it comes?
Yeah, just indispensable. I mean, it's, they've been together a long time now, and Chris Hart has been the architect of a lot of these teams from the recruiting standpoint. I mean, it's, he and I love the way they build their rosters. I mean, they do a great job blending the freshmen with, a couple of, pick some JUCO guys here and there. And then they've done, I think, a great job in the portal, picking their spots there as well. And you're right, they've adapted very well. And they develop guys very well. That means that they're identifying the right players on the recruiting process and then making them better. I mean, that's how you're supposed to do it. It's just, I think it's kind of a model program in a lot of ways. And Chris Hart has a lot to do with it, and it's like some of those great relationships that you've seen in college baseball over the years, like Brian O'Connor always had Kevin McMullen right by his side, and Mark Marquess, for all those years had Dean Stotts by his side. It's like Hart's kind of like that. And those guys never really got to be head coaches. They were content to be, the number 2. Hart's going to be a head coach at NC State, pretty soon. And he's going to be great at it because he's just, he checks all the boxes. He's really, really good.
All right, my last thing for you. We talked about the ACC. We talked about NC State in general, but how excited are you for this college baseball season? Because it feels like it's, we talk about other sports across the country, how they've been building, but it feels like, college baseball has been one of those sports that's just slowly but surely built up from not just everybody focusing during Omaha, but, people focusing at the beginning of the season, seeing where these teams are and slowly kind of building into another major sport at the college level.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's been a lot of fun to watch the growth over the last 2+ decades now that I've been doing this. And you think back to how few games were on TV, back in the mid 2000s. And then, you started to get the streaming stuff and that was kind of spotty for a while. And now you can watch any game you want, all season long. And that's obviously a big deal. But you see the facilities exploding across college baseball. NC State finally joining the fray on that. The fan support, the crowd sizes, just the overall interest level has just continued to grow and grow and grow. And I think now for the first time, you got the opportunity to give everyone in your roster a full scholarship. I mean, all these years of being stuck at 11.7, decades we've been stuck at 11.7 scholarships for your 35-man roster. And now you can give everybody a full ride. And so I think we're going to see more and more talent coming to the game. I think Major League Baseball has just really continued to lead into college baseball as the primary avenue for them to develop players before they turn pro. And they're kind of, frankly, steering players to college, and slashing their affiliates because they're kind of using college baseball as a stand-in for the low minors. And that, I think, is also, I don't think it's good for baseball as a whole to have fewer professional job opportunities for players, to have minor league baseball available in fewer markets. I think that's bad for the game as a whole. But for college baseball, I mean, I guess it's a good thing because you've got, less of a gap between the college level and the big league level. I just think you're seeing more guys get there quickly. And that makes it easier for a more casual fan, I think, to connect with college baseball. So there's just a lot of reasons to be excited about the sport's future.
Perfect. Well, if people haven't already found you, Aaron, where can everybody find your work, man?
Yeah, D1Baseball.com. Our college season preview stuff is all posted now. You can find links to everything there at our season preview hub page. A lot of NC State stuff. Our guy Bradley Smart over at ACC Extra is just crushing it. Tons of in-depth Wolfpack specific content over on the ACC Extra little add-on site. So check us out, D1Baseball.com.
All right. Well, thank you to Aaron. I appreciate everybody for jumping on. We will talk to you guys again soon.